Welcome to Kent Hance, the best storyteller in Texas podcast. A lot to talk about today. We'll get to it in just a moment with the events over the weekend in the Middle East. But let's start out with your saying of the day.
Saying of the day comes from President Trump. The bully must now seek peace. And we'll discuss that a little later on in the show today. And it's been a long time coming, and it was carried out as well as you could ever carry anything out, military-wise. And but first, a couple of things. One, Brad Moran, one of our listeners, Brad been in radio business and has radio stations and TV stations, sold the TV station. But he called her hand on something, and he was right. You had said something to me about the Beach Boys. It's sold more than the Beatles, and I jumped on it and said, I think that's right, or something like that. And Brad looked it up, and he said the Beatles sold a lot more than the Beach Boys. He
sent me a text as well and said, I heard that, and my BS detector went off.
Yeah.
And I said, boy, mine would have. I can't believe I said that, but I'll own it. That one's on me.
It's kind of like he had a BS detector, like Snoops or something like that,
right.
Checking the facts out.
Right.
And I still owe a guy that contacted us on one of the things, that there were more people living in downtown Austin than any other city except New York City. And I got a guy at the Chamber of Commerce, and he's supposed to be checking it out and get back with me. So if you're the one, if you're listening and you brought that up, that you got doubts about it, well, we're checking it out. But there are a lot of people living in downtown Austin, Texas.
And they're building like they're expecting more.
Yeah. Every day you see a new building going up and taller and taller. What happened this weekend, I think we have to go back and look a little at the background. Persia was originally, Iran was originally Persia. And some of the religious militant people had taken over in the 40s and 50s, and the U.S., along with the British, our CIA and their intelligence, went in and overthrew that group in the early 50s and put in the Shah of Iran, King Reza. And he ran the country until 1979, and he had an uprising, and the people uprose, as you would say, and they were fighting back, and they wanted freedom. Well, they got the freedom, but it wasn't the freedom they wanted. It was the freedom to dress like you were told by the government, limited what you could do in schooling with some women. And the Ayatollahs, the Muslim religious groups were running the country, and that's still who's in charge today. And hopefully they will sit down and seek peace, but I doubt it. The generals, the Israelis have killed a lot of their generals, and so you're left with some religious nuts and they believe God and Allah is on their side, and that they ought to do. He's going to protect them no matter what. He's going to protect them about as well as they protected that nuclear site, with the B-2 bombers. And I think it shows the superior military we have. It is far superior to anything. Russians, that war with Ukraine should not have lasted 2 weeks, and they're still fighting, and they may eventually win. But the American military is superb. It's really up to date and in good shape. But once the Ayatollah Khomeini took over and they were in charge, you go back and look, and I made a list. I wrote down a list of that they took over the U.S. Embassy in 1979, kept those people hostage for over a year, and Reagan got them out the day he got in, and Carter, some helped on that. But I think it showed the defeat of Carter, because it showed that they were inept in dealing with a foreign administration, and that it just got away from them. There wasn't any, and they tried to fly in the desert and have some buses pick them up and go into town of Tehran. Tehran's probably got the worst traffic. I mean, it's worse than Dallas or Houston or Austin in, prime time. That's that way all the time. And they were going to rescue the hostages and bring them back. Well, the helicopters ran into each other, and it was just a disaster. And it was not well planned, and it made the U.S. look weak. What happened this last weekend with the B-2 bombers, they're flying out of Missouri, and the round trip, 30 hours, and they don't stop to refuel. They refuel while in flight. And the Iranians didn't know what was happening. I mean, those bombs started dropping, and that was it, if you were near them. And there's on the internet, there's pictures now that was taken miles away of the explosions, and it was big. But they flew in, bombed, and left before the Iranians had any idea what was going on, and probably still don't to a certain extent. But in April of '83, the U.S. Embassy in Beirut was bombed and killed 63. Then October of '83, you had 241 Marines that were killed in Beirut. And they were sent over, and Congress had a vote on it, and I voted against it. There were 3 people, Texas voted against it, and it was an odd group. Mickey Leland, who voted against any type of war or anything. He's a very liberal Democrat. Ron Paul, who was a libertarian, and me. And the reason I did is they didn't give them ammunition. You sent in all those troops, and they didn't have bullets for their gun. And it's just crazy that to show a force that we're going to be forced. Well, they don't have bullets they don't have the ammunition. And so sure, somebody's going to try to do something. I thought it was just a crazy plan and was not well executed, and killed all, of 241 Marines. And that was in October of '83. Then in September of '84, the U.S. Embassy annex was bombed in Beirut, and it killed 24 people, and 2 of them were Americans. Then in '87, U.S. tanker, U.S. flag tanker bridge, it was fired upon and hit and attacked. And then in October of '87, another U.S. Tanker, Sea Isle City, was attacked and shot up. And then in 1988, the Khobar Towers that housed some Americans in Saudi Arabia, it was bombed and killed 19 U.S. military people. And then in 2000, they attacked a lot of the people in Iraq, the Iranians did. And they continued to harass the U.S. forces. 2012, they shot up Navy ships. And then in U.S. bases, in our military bases in the Middle East, they've continued to have a on and off again battle with those. And that the bases in Iraq, Syria, and Jordan came under heavy fire. And they've done this through other groups like Hezbollah in Beirut, and Hamas in the West Gaza Strip, and they do it through proxy. And when they reached an agreement to let the Iranians have some of their cash back, that Biden did that, what did they do with it immediately? They build up more terrorist groups. And something had to be done, because if those people got nuclear weapons, they'd use them.
And give them to their friends.
Yeah, and they would give them to all the terrorist groups that they supported. So I think he really was in a position he couldn't kick the can down the road. The can's been kicked down the road. Obama said some strong things, but he didn't do anything. And he would draw a red line in the sand and then not do anything. And I think that a couple of things come out of this. Number one, there are leaders in other countries that they're going to say, I don't want to mess with Trump. And they may claim he's crazy or whatever, but they're not going to test him because he's going to pass the test. They had given him 60 days and they didn't comply. And the first leader he talked to after he was elected president was Netanyahu. And Netanyahu, he knew what they were up against. And so they started after the Iranians and were able to take out some of the military things they had and some of the nuclear war production they had, but they couldn't take out the deep ones in the mountain, and we were able to do that, and Trump gave them plenty of opportunity, and they're saying they're still not going to negotiate, and I think they will try to set off some Hezbollah type action throughout the world in the next few weeks if they can. And that's going to be a real problem because the next thing that will go would be the refineries. And if they can't sell oil and gas, I mean, they'll have no money. And you're dealing with people that are basically stupid on international affairs. And they think that they just need to, blow things up and everybody's going to come to their aid. Well, that's just the opposite. The more aggressive they are, the worse it's going to be for them. And so we'll see what happens, but I don't think it's over by any means. If they were smart, they'd negotiate something and move forward. But I think you're dealing with some religious nuts. There's no nut like somebody that they think God told them what to do, and they're supposed to do it no matter what. I had a guy one time who was kind of unusual guy, and he told me that God had wanted me to buy an insurance policy from him. And I said, well, I talked to him last night, and he told me not to. You always there's always some unusual folks out there, on any take that you'll have. But I thought that Rubio and the president had said that they all, and J.D. Vance, that they all did well, and they were well organized, knew what they were doing.
I have clips for you, Chancellor, of from reaction from the president's announcement, also Pete Hegseth and General Kane. Thought I would share these with you and then get your comment.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace.
The scope and scale of what occurred last night would take the breath away of almost any American if you had an opportunity to watch it in real time.
This was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown. This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military.
Well, I think they're right on target. I mean, that these people, if they think, well, we'll just fight back. Look, when you've lost, and somebody's saying, let's negotiate, try to cut the best deal you can. But they are not going to be allowed to have nuclear weapons. You look at this, and I think Trump's done an outstanding job on foreign policy. He went to the Middle East and went to see every leader and had visits with them to assure them that we're there for their protection. And I think there's a lot of jubilation in the Middle East today on what happened last night because they're all scared to death if the Iranians got nuclear warheads, what they would do with it. And they would utilize that to try to be the supreme power in the Middle East. But you look at what President Trump did this weekend and compare it to how Biden handled Afghanistan. That was the worst mistake we've made in foreign affairs in the history of the nation. We just gave that country away. And now, girls, they get past the 4th to 6th grade. They can't go to school anymore. All these very liberal groups, they don't say anything about that. They don't speak up. But women are not treated well in Afghanistan. And there's still a lot of people there that are stranded that help the U.S., and a lot have been killed. And we just lost that. And there was no reason. The war was virtually stopped in Afghanistan, and no American had been killed in over 14 months. And so, they had everything in pretty good shape, and that Trump had said he would eventually pull out, might leave a force there to keep peace.
Like we did in Europe and Japan.
Yeah, like we did in Germany and Japan and in Korea. Mm-hmm. And we've still got troops there today. And there's peace, and they have elections, and they've got freedom.
And they're our allies.
They're our allies, our best allies. And Afghanistan and Iraq could have been that, and Iraq still has that chance. But Afghanistan, we just gave it to them and gave them all of our equipment, and it was the worst decision. And at some point in time, the press didn't call them out on it. They gave them a free rein, and there was very little. They didn't ask tough questions. If something goes wrong on this and there's retaliation for the Iranians, the national media is going to ask tough questions, but they don't ask tough questions of Obama or Biden. I still go back that everyone in the nation knew that that Biden was impaired. And after that debate, I'm in Bermuda watching CNN, and they were like, "Can you believe that? Wonder what's happening? How did that happen so fast?" Well, the average citizen been watching it on TV,
and they told us we were crazy for thinking.
Yeah, you shouldn't be even thinking about it.
That's such a good point you made when you compare and contrast the withdrawal of Afghanistan with the exercises last night. How the Americans were in and out of them there before they even knew it, versus the planning and the disorganization of the withdrawal in Afghanistan. It's striking.
Well, and finally, Biden said, just get them out. Mm-hmm. And his generals were saying, you shouldn't do that, need to have it orderly, need to get the equipment out and things like that. He just said, get them out.
Yeah.
And somebody on his staff, I think, his staff was really overburdened with the progressives, and that's just the way they think. Mm-hmm. And but I think there'll be very little criticism on this. There's going to be some Democrats, and they may find a Republican or two that's against anything happening like this. But to let them have nuclear warheads, this wasn't an option.
Something else that was interesting about this, and it's kind of gone a little bit overlooked, is the operational security of the entire thing. Congress was not notified that it's going to happen for fear the AOCs of the world and the Ilhan Omars they'd let them know.
Yeah, you can't look. Even if you tell limited numbers, you still are face the possibility they're going to tell somebody.
Right.
And but if you notify Congress, talk to them, they're going to broadcast it.
There were no leaks on this.
None.
Again, compare that to the prior administration with leaks, and it was well done.
It was, and you look at the people, and you can hear them talking, and they're talking Farsi. They're not speaking in English, but they're seeing the bombs blow up, and they're recording that, and it's pretty impressive.
Chancellor, do you think that, you mentioned it earlier, the neighbors of Iran and the Arab world, they may not come out and say it directly, but they're thinking, they're thrilled, but they're not going to say it.
No. In 2001, a week before 9/11, I was in Turkey, and we had it was former members of Congress, and we had a dinner at the U.S. Embassy, and the ambassador said, we kind of live in a bad neighborhood. Is Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran. I mean, all the bad boys lived in that neighborhood. And he said that the biggest fear were the Iranians. And everybody knew what they were wanting to do. And the Ayatollahs wanted to make sure that they had nuclear weapons someday and they could threaten people with those and maybe drop one or two if they need to. And, the Russians and the Chinese, they're not going to drop nuclear weapons. They know better. They the mass destruction on both sides. But the precision that we did this got everyone's attention. And there's going to be a lot of people that if they have to choose whose side they're on now, they're going to choose the Americans. They may not get out there and say a lot because they don't want to get hit by the Iranians, but they were happy that this happened. And the Israelis were ecstatic that we got involved to this extent.
The planning is what's amazing. There was over 100 aircraft involved in this, everything from fighter escorts to refueling to the bombers. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. That they it tells you a lot about our military, and they were called down in Afghanistan. They do what the president says and everything, but when they had to perform at a high level, they were excellent. Excellent. No one has ever seen anything like the people that we have in that regard in the military.
Wasn't even a shot fired at them.
No.
Amazing.
What's happened? They had their airplanes in 1979 that they had from the United States, and they have not been upgraded since then. Hadn't been changed. It's just so they have no control of the sky, and they've got very little Navy. If they try to block the Strait of Hormuz,
right,
they'll get blown out of the water, and they might block it a few days or something, but they're going to have real problems.
That's the threat that these people seem to be worried about the most, is that happening. But
Strait of Hormuz, it's not very wide, and a lot of tankers go through all the time, filled with oil to bring to the United States and Europe and other places on Earth.
I know you don't have a crystal ball, but do you see an increase in oil prices?
Yeah, oil prices, if futures market's already up, and we'll wait and see what happens this coming week. But they might drop back a little, but it'll still be above what it was a week ago, substantially. How many minutes?
We are at 24. Did you want to talk about Aunt Moita?
Yeah,
I could bring that up.
Who wrote me?
Judge Yackel.
Yeah, we got a letter from Judge Yackel, federal judge here, a good friend of mine in college, and he mentioned that not only did he know me and listen to my podcast, but that I had an Aunt Moita, and I did. She lived to be 103, and at the funeral, I did the eulogy, and so did the judge, and he did the eulogy, and she loved the judge, and it was Moeta, and there's a street out by Lakeway named Moita, named after her.
Is that right?
Yeah, and she was she drove till she was in the 90s, and she had a 75th wedding anniversary. Wow. I sponsored a party, and Uncle Robert, he said he liked us much. Maybe we ought to have one at 76. He didn't know they could make 80, and they made 76.
Wow.
And he passed away before they made 77. But that's a long time in this day and time. I mean, you can take sometimes 10 marriages, and they won't add up to 77.
You're right.
Much less have the accomplishments that they had. But I'm going to have Judge Yackel on sometime.
You guys go way back.
Oh yeah, and we'll hear some of his stories and some of the most entertaining stories that he's had as a federal judge. Mm-hmm. Being a federal judge is at times a lonely job. And Sam Hall was in Congress with me, and he got appointed federal judge. And I called him and talked to him about it after he'd had I'd call him regularly, but he had been there about 2 years. And I said, how does it compare to being in Congress? He said it's like watching wallpaper dry. And he said the difference is, as a federal judge, you're watching wallpaper dry. In Congress, there's something going on every day. Mm-hmm. But he enjoyed being a judge, but he said the slowdown was like you just slammed on the brakes.
I'd imagine.
And one other thing I wanted to mention, Dave, I was looking, there was one of the hotels in Vegas, for a bottle of water, it's $26. Mm-hmm. And so, inflation has hit, and also there was a deal on stupid criminals. There was a woman married a guy, and he didn't know it. What she did, she had the marriage license, and she, got a preacher to sign it that she is married to this guy, and he didn't even know about it until he found out from somebody else.
Oh.
She had charges filed against it. And they also had the most livable city in the world today is Copenhagen, Denmark. And I tell you, Denmark has a pretty honest government, but they give them so much money. There's free health care and free education, free everything. And so they have to watch them like a hawk to make sure that they don't waste any of that money. But it's a pretty socialistic controlled society.
Have you been there?
No, I have not. Mm-hmm. I've been to Finland, Sweden, and the other countries in Estonia. In that I took my class, my high school class, and there was only 26 or 27 went. We went to visit. Our foreign exchange student was from Finland, and she her husband owned the hockey team in Helsinki. That's kind of like owning the Dallas Cowboys.
Right.
And we went to Finland. We were there, and then we went to St. Petersburg, mm-hmm. and went to the Hermitage there. And that's a great museum. Great museum. It's tired. They need to update it, but they don't have any money. Mm-hmm. And then went to Estonia. Estonia's a beautiful city and small country, but people are very friendly. They love Americans.
Chancellor, you want to wrap things up for today? Great episode. We encourage you to go back and listen to our prior episodes and look forward to having Judge Lee Yakel on with us. But you want to wrap it up with your saying of the day, reminder?
Saying of the day came from President Trump, said the bully must now seek peace. And hopefully they do. But this is not just over yet, but the threat of them having a nuclear warhead every day that we were living with, will not have to worry about that.